gives me great pleasure to welcome the participants and guests of the 2023 Baltic Symposium, whose theme this year is How the Baltics Are Shaping Europe. I'm Diane Koenker, and I'm the director of the UCL School of Slavonic and East European Studies. Before I continue, I have an important safety announcement to make. Please notice the fire exits in the back and on the side. If you hear a fire alarm, it's real, not fake. So please make your way to the safety exits. The lavatories are on the floor below ours if you go out the back way as well. So the UCL School of Slavonic and East European Studies is the co-organizer of this event, along with the Baltic Council in Great Britain, the embassies of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in London. And we're supported by the British Latvian Association, British Lithuanian Society, Estonian House London, and Latvian Educational Foundation. We've been organizing these symposia every 2 years for a number of years until 2018. The most recent Baltic Symposium took place in April of 2018. Preparations for the next symposium in April 2020 were complete, and its theme was The Baltic Way Forward, Responses to Global Disruptions. But the COVID-19 pandemic required us to cancel that event, a global disruption we did not foresee. We're happy to be able to resume this important forum at this critical time in the history of Europe. Since 2018, the region and we have endured the epidemic and its aftermath, and now the tragedy of Russia's war in Ukraine. So much has changed in those 3 years of interruption. The planners have all agreed that the role of the Baltic states in Europe has never been more central. And I'm looking forward to hearing what our speakers and panelists will tell us about how the Baltics are shaping Europe in 2023. I want to extend a particular welcome to our panelists and chairs who come to us from the worlds of diplomacy, academia, culture, journalism, government, and non-government organizations, often combining more than one of these portfolios. In their panel discussions today, they will consider 3 topics that speak directly to the impact of war in Europe and the role of the Baltic states and societies in shaping Europe's response. We begin with the changing architecture of security in Europe, looking at issues of energy security, at the politics of NATO and its enlargement, and the Northern Europe security environment. All these developments have shifted the world's attention to the Baltics. Following a break for lunch, we resume with a panel on communication and media in wartime. In an age where dodgy dossiers have become the norm, our panelists will discuss the strategy of the practice of information, soft power, and the role of domestic and international media. We're all well aware, for example, of how the Baltic cities have become refuges for independent Russian and Belarusian media, another element of the shifting balance of power and influence. Our final panel looks at the humanitarian response to war. Given the massive upheaval of wartime refugees and the role of the Baltic states in offering safe haven, we knew we had to include this topic in this year's symposium. Our panelists will examine the social effects of wartime disruption, including population movements and humanitarian projects supporting Ukraine. Now, before turning the floor over to our keynote speaker this morning, I'd like to say a few words about the school, because I'd like you to know what a remarkably unique institution is hosting this symposium today. UCL SSEES is one of the world's leading specialist institutions and the largest national center in the UK for the multidisciplinary study of Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. SSEES was founded in 1915 by Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, who was later elected the first president of Czechoslovakia. It was an independent entity within the University of London, and then in 1999, SSEES merged with UCL. In 2004, it moved into our present purpose-built and prize-winning building just next door to this auditorium. The SSEES Library, with close to 400,000 volumes, is one of the largest in the world devoted to East European studies. SSEES currently is educating over 1,000 students. About 800 of these are undergraduates with pursuing degrees in a number of different program areas, including economics and business, politics and sociology, and language and culture. At the postgraduate level, we offer both teaching and research MA degrees, including the International Masters in Economy, State, and Society, which is a double degree program with a consortium of European universities, including UCL, University of Belgrade, Charles University, Corvinus University, Helsinki University, Jagiellonian University, and the University of Tartu. Currently, about 60 PhD students are pursuing their studies here. And I want to extend a special welcome to our SSEES and UCL students in the audience today. SSEES is home to 80 academics whose fields include history, business and economics, politics, sociology, literature and culture, and the teaching of foreign languages. We have the capacity to teach 18 languages of the region, and we employ over 30 part-time or full-time language teachers on our staff. Among these academics, I want particularly to thank Dr. Alan Sick of SSEES and Dr. Mark Kuldkep, Director of the Program of European and International Social and Political Studies, who played a key role in helping develop the program today, along with the members of the Baltic Council and the 3 embassies. Now, in addition to research and teaching, the third critical mission of SSEES is to collaborate with the public, providing and mobilizing expertise for government, the public, and the public sphere. We take great satisfaction in working with the governments of the region we study in order to provide information and to support our learning environments. The symposium today is an outstanding example of our commitment to this kind of education. Now, I arrived in London to take up this post just over 5 years ago, at a moment of great uncertainty about future relations between the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. At that time, Brexit was the great unknown, and its long-term impact on the shape of Europe is still to be determined. Since then, the climate emergency, the global pandemic, and the war in Europe have only added to our uncertainty about the future. Each of these challenges has made the role of expert analysis all the more crucial. The work of communication and collaboration represented by this symposium will guarantee that open intellectual borders will remain the hallmark of our roles in the academy, the world of scholarly inquiry, and the realm of public affairs. So I wish you a productive and stimulating symposium. And now it is my privilege to introduce to you the chair of the keynote session, His Excellency, Mr. Eitvydas Bajarūnas, Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to the United Kingdom.
So my understanding, I will stand here, yes, and the speaker, whom I will invite in 1 minute, also be here. And this is for record purpose. Yeah? So before inviting a keynote speaker, which I'm very grateful, is Lithuanian Deputy Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Foreign Minister Jovita Neliupšienė. I might also say a few words. First of all, words of thank you to SSEES, to the director, Professor Diane Koenker. When I came last year, September, and we started with the colleagues to just see the timeline of the events, I was already thrilled that one of the events of this year is the Baltic Symposium, and not least that this is the event which shifted from 2020, so already big gap from the last symposium of which was 2018, but also was thrilled that this event is with the Lithuania's accent, Lithuania's in the lead. That's why it's a privilege for any ambassador to be in this podium, to cheer, but also to be at the event with such a strong Lithuanian flavor. But I really also was thrilled to learn about the School of Slavonic and Eastern European Studies. You, Professor, just briefed us for those who are not aware. It's indeed, as my understanding, one of the largest Eastern European studies, Russia-Ukraine studies centers in UK and probably in the world. And this is, I think, a particular pleasure for us to be associated with this academic institution. I think we Baltics, Lithuania, as an emphasis, we try to gather all elements where we see Baltic mentioned, and we now are happy that there is also in Cambridge Baltic program. Recently, actually not least last week, there was a big conference on the Baltic World War I history. There is also there were few other activities which with Baltic or Lithuanian flavor. not least event, which we were recently co-hosted with the Chatham House, and few more events in this. But again, when I look to the entirety of complex attitude of these centers, CS stands really as an outstanding element. Baltics, and this year's conference is very ambitious. How the Baltics are shaping Europe. Now, when you hear Baltic countries and some very flashy announcement or saying, few ideas come to my mind. 1992, 1 year after Baltic international recognition, friend of Lithuania, friend of the Baltic countries, friend of Eastern Europe, Carl Bildt, then Prime Minister of Sweden, came with a very flashy phrase, Baltic litmus test. European security will be measured how European security architecture, post-Cold War architecture will embrace Baltics. So Baltic litmus test became known. Another friend of Lithuania, friend of the Baltics, the famous journalist who will be speaking at this event today as well, Ed Lucas, also came, not came, he is continuously with this famous, have we listened Baltics? And this is, again, Baltic countries, those who have been speaking about Russia for years, and few were listening. And then, of course, another phrase come to my mind is the punching about its weight. The Baltic countries, with the size of our economies, size of our population, and we are punching about our weight in many international fields, be it EU policy, NATO policy towards Russia, now China, Taiwan, and you name it. And then, of course, the few more elements worth to mention. And of course, when we speak about Baltic changing Europe, many good ideas come to my mind. Of course, is forthcoming NATO summit, which I would expect Vice Minister Neliupšienė will address. Again, Baltic countries, Lithuania is in the lead in pushing agendas, not only those who typically to us associated with us, Eastern European flank and NATO Eastern flank, and how we should defend, but also to a very horizontal issue of the Baltic pledge or Eastern European pledge for high NATO defense spending. And again, Baltic countries here are showing great example with a 2.5, even more of the spending on defense. Of course, Baltic support towards Ukraine is exemplary. And again, you will hear today presentations, especially by Blue Yellow, Jonas Oman, who was with us. 2014, after Russia's annexation of Crimea and waging the war in Eastern Europe, and a few months after this, the enthusiasm to support Ukraine started to fade. And Jonas was among few Baltic leaders, Lithuanian leaders, with his organization Blue Yellow, continuously to push for Ukraine case not to be forgotten. Of course, Baltic resilience against Russia's hybrid and operation against disinformation also worth to mention. That although we are on the front line of Russia's experiments in waging this asymmetrical war, but we also are example of those countries who have and societies who probably are most resilient against this notorious Russian acts. I will not continue. I would be now privileged to invite Vice Minister, who also should stand somewhere here because of recording purpose. Jovita, you are invited. While Jovita is spending So our arrangement will be, you stand here, you speak, I will be silent, and then we will sit here because this Q&A session will be not recorded and would allow us for greater interaction between audience and you. So I will not introduce Jovita because it's you all have her CV, distinguished career in Lithuania's foreign policy. Recently, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation, Ambassador, Lithuania's representative to European Union, Brussels, and not least, this is probably worth to mention, the Senior Foreign Policy Advisor to the President Grybauskaitė, which those for you knowing Dalia Grybauskaitė, you should understand. What does it mean? So, Jovita,
thank you, thank you, Ambassador. After this this presentation and introduction of my humble personality, I feel a bit all eyes on me, friends and colleagues. It's a privilege to speak here in SSEES, and I think that one of the missions of SSEES is definitely to work and coordinate and send a message of Eastern European studies and know-how and knowledge as such. I think this is the key, and I'm looking forward for the upcoming discussions of today, and really hope that this regularity of the Baltic symposiums will be resumed, and no other kind of COVIDs or other pandemics or other reasons will stop us from it. Europe is facing a number of challenges, from social, health, economic, humanitarian, and now military. And Ambassador rightly so mentioned that Carl Bildt more than 30 years ago spoke about Baltic litmus test. And I think right now we have to pass another kind of litmus test, and it's a Ukraine litmus test, because the future of Ukraine will define the future of Europe. The outcome of war in Ukraine will actually have an influence and will define what kind of future we have altogether, and it will determine the Europe what we have for the next 30 to 40 years. Russia has unprovoked, illegal, unjustified all-out military aggression against Ukraine, which started on 24th of February 2022, is a watershed moment in modern European history. The period of the post-Cold War is now truly over. There is no going back to a relatively nice and cozy pre-24 February world. Things cannot simply be undone. Bucha cannot be undone. Bucha cannot be unseen. There is no going back because Russia under Putin has no intention to dial down. Putin has made his mission to destroy Ukraine as a state, as a political entity, as a democracy. The West cannot let it happen. Ukraine has no intention to let it happen as well. To put in simple terms, any meaningful dialogue or peace negotiation with Putinist Russia is no realistic option. We will be facing a battle of wills. As the war is now well into the second year, we have to face a reality. It might mean that a protracted conflict, a war of attrition, is becoming the most realistic prospect. Putin hopes to outsuffer all of us. This is how Russia might try to convince Ukraine and the West to negotiate peace or ceasefire settlement. The war of attrition is a war of logistic, supply lines, is just-in-time deliveries. Ukraine's fierce resistance and the West political, military, financial, and humanitarian support has so far denied Russia achieving its primary military and political objectives. Russia was forced to modify its initial goals to a considerable extent. Ukraine has also been able to puncture myth of Russia's almighty army. But Ukraine badly needs modern Western military equipment, including battle tanks, fighter jets, as well as ammunition. Clearly, so far, Russia is not winning in Ukraine, but it's not losing either. It has been pushed back by Ukraine, but it retains significant part of Ukraine's territories in the south and in the east. We're in for a long haul. So the question is, what to do? First of all, sanction policy. We need to further keep pressure on Kremlin. We have to expand the scope of their sanctions, as well tighten their application. EU's 10th package of sanctions is quite a remarkable achievement. However, the sanction regime currently starts to resemble to Emmental cheese. It's big and looks very impressive, but it has a sizable holes in it. We need to fix it. Our next steps should be lowering the price ceiling for Russian oil. We also need to sanction Russian nuclear energy, Rosatom, its operator, its contracts, its new investment projects, its people associated with nuclear energy. We also have to de-SWIFT all Russian and Belarusian banks, but not only to de-SWIFT, we have to freeze their assets, because Ukraine needs money. All oligarchs and officials instrumental to regime in Moscow and Minsk have to be sanctioned. Solidarity and unity by EU, UK, US, and so-called coalition of sanctions swiftly implements the sanction policy, and it has been remarkably successful if we look to the recent past. Still, a lot of work has to be done in the place like a city of London. We have to close all the Emmental holes in the money laundering. Sanctions do work, but they work slowly. We have and we need to have a strategic patience. Second, responsibility. Special tribune and bringing to the responsibilities and to justice not only those who shoot, who rape, who bomb, who kill in general, but those as well who actually order all those atrocities. And the only way to do that is actually to mobilize international support for the special tribunal. If we brought to justice Milosevic, why can't we brought to justice Putin? So we have to work together without all, the differences in our legal system. But this is only way to send a signal, not only for Russia, but as well for others. So for the others not to take the same path of aggression. Third, to get rid of dependencies. We have to address the double challenge of energy and food security, which we face today. Europe has to wean itself off from Russian oil and gas, entirely and for good. In securing our energy supply, we need to switch from Russia to US, Norway, Qatar, Australia. Diversification is the answer, and we have to become green. The greener we are, the less dependent we will become. Less dependent we are on Russian raw materials, the better. We don't need to feed their military machine by ourselves. Fourth, last but not least, maybe even most important work we have to be doing is actually to make future-proof our security from Kremlin's revanchist and revisionist schemes. Our support to Ukraine has to continue. We have to be prepared to sustain serious economic and financial constraints for considerable future of time. Making Ukraine stronger and more resilient is our duty. Despite humiliating military setbacks, Russian goals remain unchanged, denying Ukraine's statehood, independence, and sovereignty, and demolishing European security architecture. Russian military still remains a formidable force backed by a nuclear arsenal. Given Putin's adventurism, my bet would be that we will still have to brace ourselves for a number of strategic surprises coming from Russia in the short and long term. But not just to brace ourselves, we'll have to think big and to act strategically. The post-Cold War period was finished on 24th of February 2022. We are now entering entirely new era in Europe's political history. I do not see going to business as usual with Russia and probably with Belarus ever again. I cannot imagine a scenario with the current sanctions against Russia and Belarus to be revoked. It is important in the longer term, especially to make sure Russia has no technology, no money, no motives to restore their military might. Because the next time we will be facing, be it 7, be it 10 years, we're facing Russia, which actually learned its lesson because Ukraine is too big for them. Ukraine is too strong for them. So the next step will be someone smaller, more affordable. So look around Russia, look at the map. It may be Moldova, it may be Georgia, but it may be the Baltic states or maybe Poland. So what we need to defeat Russia. Russia should not simply be stopped in Ukraine. Russia should suffer a strategic defeat in Ukraine. That's why Ukraine needs to gain the advantage in the battlefield. 3 months leading to NATO Vilnius summit will be crucial in this regard. Ukraine should try and retake as much as it can. Ukraine has to be firmly anchored in the democratic Western community. That's why we believe that EU should launch accession talks with Ukraine already this year. That's why NATO Vilnius summit in July this year, Ukraine should be offered a clear roadmap for political, practical, and military cooperation measures ensuring its security. We need to plan ahead. Look at Ukraine's recovery after the war, after the victory. Planning has to start right now. We need to pool our experience and resources, not only to make the recovery efforts effective, but also to send a signal that we have no doubt which side the victory will be. Again, political commitment alone does not cut the mustard. It should be backed by credible and sustainable military support, tanks, ammunition, fighter jets, trainings, and I will not be tired to repeat this. Because the previous recipes do not work with Putinist Russia. I believe we have accumulated enough experience to realize that Putin and Putinist Russia do not believe and do not take our mechanism and agreements, and they do not work for them. Putinism does not operate through dialogue or logic of win-win. This is for us, not for them. We know that 6-point plan for Georgia and Russia conflict didn't work. We know that Budapest Memorandum didn't work. We know that Normandy and Minsk agreements didn't work. Well, also after invading Ukraine and gobbling up Belarus, NATO-Russia Founding Act is not worth the paper it is written on. That's why joining NATO for Finland and Sweden has become only rational and logical security and defense policy option today. In this context, Finland's and Sweden's membership in NATO will make us and them safer, and NATO stronger. It will greatly increase security in the Baltic regions, especially Baltic states. However, this must not be an excuse for not increasing defensibility and continuation of strengthening defense capacities and capabilities of NATO Eastern flank in general, and the Baltic states in particular. Looking back at the periods leading up to Russia's military aggression against Ukraine, we see that all our efforts to dissuade Russia from war failed. Why? Because half measures doesn't work with Russia. I do believe that any detente or modus vivendi with Russia is only possible if there is a sufficiently convincing deterrence in place. Kremlin starts paying attention to us only if and only we speak from the position of strength. But you can speak from the position of strength when you are strong and you mean it. That's why 2% of GDP for defense should become NATO's collective starting point, not desirable ceiling to be achieved in some not foreseeable future. Our political signaling on serious consequences and unprecedented sanctions were brushed aside by Kremlin. Yes, Russia has been surprised by our severe response, by our sanction, by a level of our unity. But in order to avoid NATO-Russia military conflict in the future, after the Ukrainian war is finished, we need to get really seriously about deterrence and collective defense of alliance. Deterrence by denial is only the answer. In order to get European security right, we need to secure NATO's eastern flank. We also need to address very specifically security of the Baltics region. In our case, the most vulnerable point is Suwalki Gap, where Russia might be tempted to establish land corridor with Kaliningrad district. The only answer to this threat is substantial military presence of NATO rotational forces and German combat brigade deployed in Lithuania in foreseeable future. European security and stability without a solid and lasting US presence is simply not possible. We have to further strengthen transatlantic link. We also need to expand NATO-EU cooperation. Last but not least, EU-UK cooperation has to be strengthened. The Windsor framework marks the beginning of a new era in the EU-UK relation. The time has come to turn the new page, to go to the more qualitative new chapter in our cooperation. We have to work even closer together on sanction policy, military, financial, humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, energy security, disinformation, foreign and security policy, etc. We all want democracy, rule of law, and our values to prevail over aggression, sphere of influence, and war. For that, we need to act. If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change, wrote Di Lampedusa in Leopard. Our task today is to secure a safe, prosperous, and democratic future for Europe. In order to do that, we all together have to pass the litmus test of Ukraine. Thank you very much.